clock turned up. Game clock at 8. He's going to do it himself. Thomas, shake, crossover, step back.
This is March Madness.
It's in the Mark to tie it.
Where impossible is nothing.
Daniel on the screen. Walker with 7.
Got a mismatch.
Walker on the game with 4. Kemba Walker. Step back. Walker. Cardiac. Kemba does it again.
Player of the year. Taking it right out. Draymond Morgan. 6.6 left. Draymond Green. Times loses for the win. Spartans move to the Sweet 16.
And dreams become a reality.
This is an example. You know, we worked hard. We believe that we can do it. We had faith, and we just gotta thank God, man.
Tony, what are your thoughts at this moment? Just like all these recent games. High drama, heart-stopping.
And full of moments like these.
7 seconds. Villanova trying to go length of the court with Archie Diacono. 3 seconds at midcourt. Jenkins gives it to Jenkins for the championship. National champions.
Hello, everybody. What an intro, eh? Pure cinema. Got to relive some of the most beautiful moments from the past tournaments there. Just the absolute beauty that this sport brings, especially during this time of year, is unmatched. And here we are with possibly the most insane edition, version, whatever you want to call it. This tournament is about to be like none other. Truly like none other. And I am extremely excited to get it all going. Oh man, a long time coming. We're going to get it to here. Couldn't see my mouse for a second. Fun stuff. But fellas, welcome. The road ends in Houston once again. You can blame Reagan for the budgetary issues. But besides the point, we are here. I am Kamish Daniel, and I'm not alone. For this, we have a star-studded cast with us. With me are West Virginia head coach and Big 12 tournament champion Coach Mays, Michigan head coach and Big 10 tournament champion Coach Rodriguez, Notre Dame head coach Pike, and Alabama head coach Killian. We've been waiting so long for this day. I mean, genuinely so long. And just to put it simply, along with you guys, I'm just so excited to finally see who has made this field of 68. Now, before we reveal it, I just want to get everybody's quick thoughts before we unveil this year's tournament field. Starting with you, Coach Mays, give us your thoughts.
I definitely think there's going to be a lot of parity and a lot of upsets in this tournament. This is the most parity I think I may have ever seen in college basketball. You have some insane storylines going into this tournament. And hopefully we get some good matchups just to add to the absolute cinema that this season has been.
I 100% agree. It's been just so chaotic. Never a dull moment throughout this entire season. from week 0, all the way to week 16 and the conference tournament week, especially when it came down to championship day. Coach Rod, you are back for yet again another tournament as you have taken the Big Ten crown, but as you anticipate to see who is a part of this 68 team field, what are your biggest thoughts?
So I have a lot of thoughts, but I'm just gonna kind of simplify them. I know the committee spent well over, a couple hours, 3, 4, 5 hours alone on this bracket, so they're putting in hard work. They would just want what's best for the league, and honestly, in my opinion, I think, like going off of what Mays said, it's the most open field we've seen in a while. Last year, you had the undefeated Iowa team just absolutely dominating. And you've had these front-runner teams where they're top tier, and there's not really the other teams you think that could go in and win. But this year, we have the undefeated Tennessee, but they haven't really solidified themselves consistently in this league where they can go out and just dominate. So I think anybody can win this year, so it'll be very interesting.
The field is more wide open than ever. We've been saying this so many times. It may feel like we're a broken record at this point, but sometimes people forget, even though we've seen the dominance of those teams up at the top. I think they forget that really anything can happen. Not to mention Tennessee, as you said, have come close so many times to losing that undefeated status, yet they've survived. In Michigan, a team that just had 2 of the most obscure losses in the entire season, have just dominated everyone else. You just don't know on any given day. It's any given day in college hoops, and Coach Pike, having been immersed in this for the first time in your first full season, what do you expect going forward?
I expect a more competitive field than what I've seen before. So I'm actually excited to see how competitive these divisions are going to be in this entire tournament. I'm excited to see what teams stand out, what teams are looking to be the higher up, and what teams possibly are going to be that one championship team.
It's all going to be on the line every single night going forward. It is win or go home. Everybody's fighting for their life. And eventually we'll get down to the Final Four and just everything will move so quickly. But while we get to enjoy this moment right here, Coach Killian, what are your thoughts and feelings?
It feels great to be back. It was a long break, but now we are down to one of the greatest tournaments in all of sports, and it's going to be interesting to see. I was part of the committee, and it's interesting to see where we talked about Michigan State, we talked about Kansas. It's going to be interesting where those 2 teams lie, and then about these smaller teams and what madness they can make in this tournament.
Ah, man, so many discussions were had, not just about those 2-3 teams, but about so many of the others. And from what I have seen, this field may be the most unique and most special one I have personally seen be put together, and I can't wait to show you all. But without further ado, we gotta start it. We gotta start it off nice and right. The South region, ladies and gentlemen, is the home for the number 1 overall seed, and it is, of course, none other than the Tennessee Volunteers at 32-0 overall. Who would have thought, after being ranked number 20 in the AP preseason poll, would they go on to just wreak havoc, despite the close, 1-2 games, right? They have been dominant just all throughout, and it was on display when they made that comeback over LSU in the SEC championship game. Coach Mays, your initial thoughts on this year's number 1 overall seed?
Yeah, definitely a strong team in Tennessee this year, and I really like this group. They're gritty. As you said, they have some tight games, but no matter what this season, they have pulled them out. And that's the thing I like to see in a squad looking to make a deep run in March. is they know how to win in tight games, and they know how to get it done coming from behind.
Absolutely. And so as all Volunteer faithful gets to relish in this seeding, we have to at least find out the rest of their region. And so Tennessee will get to play one of either North Dakota or Campbell. North Dakota at 11-21, your Summit League champs. And then you got Campbell at 10-22, your Big South champs. It's just unbelievable how we've gotten these two teams in. I can't wait for that playing game, but more than likely, we're going to see Tennessee do work on whoever comes out of that matchup. Can't say for sure because we all know what happened a couple seasons ago, but I digress. The 8 and 9 line, though, it gets real interesting. Enter the Pac-12. You got the Arizona Wildcats at 23-8, semifinalists. They lost to USC, but they've had a pretty good season, a very good season up to this point. But they're gonna have to first get through the Terrapins of Maryland at 22-9, a solid season themselves. Weren't necessarily thought of as a team that could contend with many of the teams that they actually beaten this season. And let's just put it this way, either one of those teams will give Tennessee a hard-fought matchup, but I think the cinema lies beneath. At the 5 line, you got Florida Atlantic at 31-1. Again, another amazing season for the Owls. I mean, most notably, they've had a win versus Creighton, an unfortunate loss to Georgia Mason, though, so they could have been 32-0. It's crazy to think about. But in order for them to really pursue their biggest dreams and goals, they're going to have to get past 27-5 Bradley, who outright dominated the Missouri Valley Conference. Fellas, are we inclined to pick upset here, or I should say, most specifically, Coach Rod, what do we think of this matchup right here?
I think this is all FAU right here against that Bradley. I know Bradley's kind of a sneaky team, always is in real life. We're in here. But FAU, I mean, they have the quality wins. They beat, as we saw, the Big East champions, Creighton, earlier in the year. They also have beaten Kentucky, so they know how to play that. I mean, 31-1's no joke, so I got FAU in this.
For sure, and I definitely understand that take. It's just, let's put it this way, I think Bradley's got some certain spunk to them that we all haven't seen yet, but come the day that they play FAU, I think it'll be put on display. So I'll just call it early. I think we're going to see Bradley over Florida Atlantic. But moving on down to the 4 and 13 line, you got the Ducks of Oregon at 25-6. Lost a tight one to Colorado in the semifinals of the Pac-12 tournament. A very solid team. Also, just real quick, great first year by Coach Franks. It's not what they wanted ultimately in terms of where they wanted to go, but still, that's a great start for them. But in order for them to keep it going, or at least to rebound, they're going to have to get past 24-8. Grand Canyon, winners of the WAC. Oh boy. Coach Pike, what do we think about this one?
I mean, it's a tough deal. I mean, you're seated in a 4 spot. I mean, there's not really much you can't say. You just got to get over the fact that you're playing a conference champion, and hopefully you can rebound and move on to the second round.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that. But that right there is the top quadrant. And now we move on down to the lower quadrant. At the 6th line, you've got the Red Storm of St. John's ending up where they were last year at 24-6. They started off very, very well, very hot, but tapered off simply because of the competition that they faced. And unfortunately, just couldn't generate enough momentum to carry them through to another 1 or 2 extra wins. Got knocked out by Villanova in the quarterfinals of the Big East tournament. But they will have to play the Baylor Bears, who made a absolute resurgence at the very end of the season, knocking off teams like Oklahoma, Kansas State in the Big 12 quarterfinals, and then Iowa State in the Big 12 semifinals before falling to West Virginia in the Big 12 championship. This is a team that wasn't in the tournament field before the Big 12 tournament started, and now they're here. Coach Mays, you beat this team, but what do you think about the Bears not even being a play-in?
I think I have to agree with the committee's decision here. Most of these play-in teams we typically see have either gained themselves an at-large bid through playing through a good stretch in a mid-major conference, or you see them have kind of stretches where you question if they are a tournament caliber team in a Power 6 conference, but they pull it together near the end, which is the case with the Bears. But I think the Bears did just enough to find themselves outside of the play-in.
100%. I mean, the quality of teams that they've beaten is no joke, but we have to move on down. At the 3 seed, you've got them Heels, baby, from North Carolina. Unfortunate way to finish their season before the start of March Madness, where they fell to Florida State in the ACC Tournament Championship game, but they still rose up quite a bit, and unlike last season, they finished off a lot better. Remember, they had that slump towards the end of the season last season, and they just didn't recover. They had a much better finish, and as a result of that, much better seeding. But they will have to get through the Howard Bison, the MEAC winners at 22-10. I think they're a sleeper team, but them Heels are too strong in my opinion. At the 7-10 line, you've got the Bulldogs of Gonzaga. Very strange placement here for this team. As we know, they've been seeded 2-1 in the past couple tournaments, especially remembering what their records are, 32-0 and then 33-0. And just this year, just been a different team. They've lost key pieces, but they're still here. They'll have to get through Miami first, though, at 22-9. Basically, the Miami Wildcats, because this team was taken basically out of Davidson as Coach Teeter switched jobs to a much better location program, and now he's back in March with a different program. It'll be interesting to see how Miami does. Coach Rod, what are your thoughts on the 7-10 line?
Very interesting. We know Gonzaga hasn't had the greatest year by terms of the Gonzaga way. They were recently undefeated, I believe, one season. They're always dominant. They usually come into March with only either no losses, 1 loss, or 2 losses. And they're usually a 1 to 3 kind of seed team. So seeing them at this 7 lines, very interesting. But that strength of schedule from Gonzaga is something that worries me. And the way Miami's been playing at the end of the year, I think Miami could come out victorious.
It could definitely happen, and I can see it. And that's why the seeding for these two teams feels proper. But to finish off the South region at the 2 seed, once again, back-to-back seasons, enter the Huskies of UConn. Now it's a little different for them. They're not coming off a Big East championship. They failed to make it 3 times in a row against Creighton from a couple of days ago, But at 27-6, still a very strong resume. They'll first have to get past the Owls of Kennesaw State, the ASUN champs at 21-11. As I see, we have some ads popping up. That's crazy. But while these ads are running for whoever they're running, we'll take a little bit of time to just gloss over and to just talk about what we see here. Coach Pike, early predictions?
I really don't see anything. I mean, you might see like a little bit of upset from here and there, but I feel like the higher seeds in this one bracket are just going to take the advantage of those in the lower seeds. So I don't expect to see many upsets, but we could see 1 or 2 possibly in this bracket. I don't know which teams in general, because anything could happen.
Oh, for sure, and I agree with that. And then before we move on, just to let everybody get an opportunity to see the South region again, what are your thoughts and opinions on this region, Coach Killian?
It's definitely interesting to see Miami Gonzaga. I think that's a really great matchup, and I think that's also where you can see the first upset in this region. I see Miami beating Gonzaga, and then you also got to look at that Bradley and Florida Atlantic matchup right there. I think you could also see Bradley moving on in that matchup as well.
I absolutely agree with that assessment. It is a very interesting region, nonetheless. But let's move on to the East region, home of the second best 1 seed. Hail, hail to Michigan. It is the Wolverines here at 31-2 overall, undefeated in the Big Ten Conference, and took down Michigan State in dominant fashion for the outright conference title. I'm not going to ask any questions here. I'm not going to reveal anything at all. But just to put it simply, this Michigan team, like I said before, 2 of the most obscure losses in the entire country. Had it not been for those 2 losses, maybe they are the number 1 overall seed. But it was not meant to be. But let's at least take a look and see who is in their region. At the 16 line, they will get the winner of Weber State and Southeast Missouri State. Weber State at 18-13, the Big Sky Conference champs. And then you got Southeast Missouri State at 15-17, the Ohio Valley Conference champs. I think that'll be an interesting 16 matchup that we'll see in the play-in round. But regardless, the Wolverines should clean up. Should. We will italicize that. At the 8 and 9 line, you got the Tigers of Clemson at 23-7. A very interesting seeding here for this program. They've been very, very solid throughout this season so far. And let's just put it this way. Had it not been for a kind of an ice-cold finish, they'd be seeded higher. But that's how the cards fall sometimes. So instead of being up higher, at the 9 line, they're going to have to play the Providence Friars at 22-9. Coach Chungi, in his first season, has brought the Friars back to the big dance after a multi-year absence once Coach Robinson departed. But let's just put it this way. They started off very hot this year. And so at 22-9, maybe people think, oh, they should be higher or they should be lower. I think this is one of the most polarizing 9 seeds that we have seen. But moving on down to the 5 and 12 line, here's where things get interesting. Enter the Mountaineers of West Virginia at 25-7. Like I said before, your Big 12 tournament champs. What an incredible, I would say, bounce back, especially towards the end of the season for Coach Mays and his squad. But how they're going to get rewarded may be the most fairy tale way of doing it I have ever seen. Enter 29-3 Marshall, your Sun Belt Conference champions. How did we get this matchup? I'm still scratching my head. Coach Mace, what are your thoughts?
Definitely exciting to have the 2 Division I teams in the state of West Virginia. There are only 2 facing off in the first round of the NCAA tournament. I'm extremely proud of my squad for making that run they had and getting our first Big 12 championship in school history. But I love this matchup. Marshall is a great squad, one of the best mid-major squads out there. We're going to have to come with our A game to beat this team. And my boys will be prepared, but I'm excited to see how this one goes.
Absolutely, and some of the reactions could be, well, Marshall is way underseeded for their record. When I've seen this bracket, I've asked the committee, why is Marshall at 12? And they said, look, despite the incredible record, they really didn't play anyone worth of extreme value, not like certain other teams did that have made this field. Like, for example, Florida Atlantic. So that's why they're seated at 12. But it still makes for an amazing matchup. But let's move on down to the 4 and 13 line. You've got the Buffaloes of Colorado, the Pac-12 runner-ups at 26-6. Coach Provo in his first season bringing the Buffaloes to a very good place. A very good place. And a lot of people think that if it wasn't for Robert Ish suffering an unfortunate injury that kept them out for a couple of months, maybe they could have snagged a win versus USC. And hey, they had him back and almost knocked off USC in Las Vegas, but it just wasn't meant to be. And so they will have to play Iona at 24-8, the MAAC champs, to start off their March Madness run, hopefully a long one. Now, Coach Pike, I'm going to give you something that you don't know about here. Colorado brought in a transfer by the name of Walter Clayton Jr. last year. He transferred from Iona. What are your thoughts on that?
You know there's going to be a lot of personal issues in that game alone, especially from the transfer portal, like you said.
It's going to be very interesting to see how that unfolds. Now, from what I understand, Walter Clayton Jr. is the backup point guard to none other than freshman stud Zaman Bohannon. But will we see a lineup change? We will see. But let's move on down to the lower quadrant. At the 6 and 11 line, you've got the Cavaliers of Virginia. They had a real nice season at 24-7. Fell in the semifinals of the ACC tournament to North Carolina. This is a team in the past couple of seasons that have been seeded high, this one, and then also at 7, and just have not played up to the standard. They've been upset 2 seasons in a row, but the faith lies in them, and people believe that they'll perform a little better. But that is to be determined because they have to go up against the Cowboys of Oklahoma State at 21-9. It's a bit unbelievable to me how far these Pokes have fell, considering how star-studded they are. But that's just how tough the Big 12 has been. But let's move on down to the 3 and 14 line. You've got the Lobos of New Mexico. What an incredible season they have had. 32-1. Their lone loss to the 8 seed in this region, Clemson. Had it not been for that loss, they could be looking at a 2 seed, maybe a 1. God knows what would have happened if they just knocked off Clemson in their home building. But in this case, they will first have to go through the Brown Bears, the Ivy League conference winners, or just Ivy League winners at 20-9. And real quick, I'll just mention the only reason they're 20-9 and not like 23-9, for example, is because for whatever reason the Ivy League just decided to not have a conference tournament this season. I don't know why. I don't know. The Brainiacs there were acting a bit weird, so Brown was robbed of another few wins. A bit unfortunate for them. But the 7 and 10 line, here we go. We got the Seminoles of Florida State. Coach Vanilla and squad made a huge resurgence. I mean huge resurgence to win the ACC tournament. Remember the last bracketology that was posted? They were sitting at an 11th seed. They have jumped up 4 seeds because of their run. An absolute amazing stretch of games for the Noles. And their reward? Oh gosh. Bring in the Gators of Florida. You cannot make this up. At 23-8 from the SEC, you've got Florida State and Florida in the first gosh darn round. Coach Killian, you've played against Florida this season. I believe once or twice. I can't quite remember. But as you're looking at this matchup right here, and then you see West Virginia and Marshall, I mean, just what are your thoughts so far? Because this is crazy.
This right here, this is a great region so far right now. With the Florida and Florida State matchup, I could see Florida winning this game. They're a very dominant team. They almost beat Tennessee. They had that great matchup with them. I can see them coming out, and then also with the West Virginia and Marshall game, I could see Marshall coming out with the win. As both of those teams are carrying a conference championship into this tournament. One of those teams are going to have the most hype coming into that game.
It's actually quite unbelievable now that we're looking at it. I mean, just how we're getting West Virginia and Marshall in the first round, and then Florida State is just unreal. But we still have 2 more teams to reveal in this region. So, who is the 2 seed? Bring in them Golden Eagles of Marquette at 26-5. Semi-finalists in the Big East tournament fell with quite of a loud thud to UConn, but at 26-5, they've still racked up quite a resume. But they'll first have to get past the American Eagles, the Patriot League champs at 21-11. I'm not going to put much thought into that, but this region overall is just absolutely insane. Coach Mays, what are your thoughts?
I think this is one of the more interesting regions for sure. Obviously, that first region, super interesting. This region, though, you have the storylines. It's just not it's not just good matchups between good teams. You have the West Virginia Marshall storyline. You have the Florida State Florida storyline. Those are two rivalry games that we are going to see in the first round alone, just in the East region. It's insane to think what kind of fireworks we could see in this tournament.
Absolutely. And one more thing before I move on from this region, we all know Marquette's head coach is Coach Nala, and she is notoriously known for trashing some aspects about America, even though she coaches a college team here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And it's just funny to me how she drew an opponent who is literally named American. So just a little food for thought. But moving on to the West region, home of the third best team in this tournament. Shock them all, to be honest, considering everything that we have seen. Enter Creighton, the Blue Jays from Omaha, Nebraska, at 27-5 overall. They are the highest seeded team to not have 30 plus wins, which is insane. But the reason for that is because of their strength of schedule. It has been insane, just all the opponents that they played, non-conference and in-conference. And yet through everything, they finished 11-1 in the Big East, won first place there, and then took down UConn in an unreal comeback for the Big East Tournament Championship. And so, Coach Rod, what are your thoughts on this team, especially knowing that this is in their first season with Coach Zelikov at the helm?
Well, we know Coach Zelikov is one of the top tier coaches, if not maybe the GOAT coach, with how much he's done in this league. Creighton, yeah, they're kind of younger, but they still got the talent, the experience that's been in March before. So I think Creighton can maybe possibly go on a national championship run, which would be one of the, I think, coolest storylines. Zelikov going from one school to another, just rebuild it and bringing back a championship after last year they had, as we know, Coach Holt, and he got canned in a year. So I think Creighton's a very good team, has a chance to make a huge run.
I definitely think so as well, considering everything that is going on, though. We can never be for sure. But let's at least take a look and see who else is in the region of the Blue Jays. They will first have to get through the Anteaters of UC Irvine, your Big West champs at 18-13. A solid little team from Cali. Could present a challenge to Creighton, but the expectation, as always, is that the Muncie pulls through. That's all I'll say. Moving on down to the 8 and 9 line, though, and here we go. Just more cinema. If what we saw in the past region wasn't enough, enter the Cornhuskers of Nebraska at 24-7 in the Big Ten. Fell in the quarterfinal round, unfortunately, to Michigan State, a team that they bested earlier in the season. They did quite well, but they will first have to get through the Razorbacks of Arkansas at 23-9. A bit crazy that we're seeing these two teams flipped, but at the end of the day, there is a possibility that we see a battle of Nebraska in the round of 32. Coach Pike, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, you're going to have a really competitive game between those two teams, and I'm actually very excited to see how both teams basically go back and forth in it. And, you know, it might be a very competitive game and huge outcome for both teams, so I'm excited to see how it goes.
Absolutely, and it is definitely quite an interesting matchup there for the 8 and 9 and the 8 and 9 line. But we got to move on down to the 5 and 12 seed. Enter last year's 1 seed, the Duke Blue Devils at 25-6. Not as strong of a season as last year, of course, but they still won the ACC regular season title. Just unfortunate that they got bounced right away by the eventual ACC tournament champs, Florida State. But they will first, in order to try and start up another run to the Final Four and try to make it there for a third season in a row, which is crazy, they will have to play the winner of Northwestern or Georgetown. Northwestern at 22-9 in the Big Ten had a decent resume. They didn't get any big-time wins. I'd say the biggest win has been against Nebraska, actually. And then you have Georgetown also at 22-9. How do I say it best? Another team that has wins, just doesn't have a marquee win. So we will see who gets out of there to play the Blue Devils in the round of 64. But moving on down to the 4-13 line. Go Tigers! LSU is back in this thing at 25-7. The runner-ups in the SEC had a lead versus Tennessee, but just could not hold on to it, as the Volunteers eventually beat them by double digits. And unfortunately, that was how things finished out for the Tigers. But they're still very much so respected amongst the committee. But they will first have to get through the Hofstra Pride, who are returning to the tournament at 24-8. Colonial champs once more. This is a very interesting round. Granted, they're without Aaron Estrada, who is now at Tennessee, actually, funny enough. But the expectation is still for this to be a cracking game. But we'll move on down to the 6-11 line, though, of this region. Bring in those Cyclones of Iowa State. Sound the alarms. Find some shelter, because at 24-8, this team is better than the record suggests. They have played an insane schedule. And hey, have the stars to prove so. But in order for them to try and make another run, they're going to have to first get past the Bearcats of Cincinnati. Coach Sutsy in his first season brings Cincinnati to the tournament. And by the way, this is Cincinnati. They are part of the American, not the Big 12. So just keep that in mind. At 25-7 is still a gosh darn good record. They fell to Houston in the American Conference Championship game by only 2 points. A very respectable end. But then at the 3-14 line, if things couldn't get more interesting, they just have. Bring in the defending national champions, Iowa, at 26-6 is at the 3 seed. Semifinal, unfortunate end in the Big Ten tournament to Michigan State. But my goodness, what a matchup this could be. But they'll first have to get past Ball State, your MAC conference champions at 22-10. Coach Killian, we see that there's Creighton, Nebraska that could see each other in the round of 32. And now, one of the big things that we've all clamored for a few seasons now, the Cy-Hawk game. If we get it here, what do you think, or how do you think it'll go?
You know, I definitely think it's going to be very interesting. I do see, if we do get this matchup, I do see Iowa State getting past that game. I think they're a more dominant team. They've had a lot more great wins. They both played the amount of same games almost, but they've played really good teams. But I still think that Iowa State can come out with a win if that game happens.
Oh, for sure. And again, just a food for thought. We could see Creighton versus Nebraska in the round of 32, and then we could see Iowa versus Iowa State in the round of 32. Just how this committee, I'll just take a second real quick. Just how things have aligned and have fallen into place for this committee to not just put teams in what I believe so far have been proper places and seeds, but to get matchups and potential matchups to be just pure cinema is going to be insane. I just can't wait. But we had to finish out this region, and then we got another one at the 7 line. War Damn Eagle, baby. Auburn is here at 24-8. Not the seeding that they've been accustomed to, because they were a 5 seed in 2031, and then in 2032 they were a 3 seed. So a bit of a fall off there, but here's the thing. It's just simply the case of the SEC just getting better. And so I think this team will show it. But if they are to show it, it's going to have to be first against Loyola Chicago. Sister Jean, if she's still alive, is back in the dance at 28-4. The A10 Conference champs. Coach Mays. We all love seeing iconic, members and teams returning to the dance. How do we feel about Loyola being back?
I mean, you love to see just these great mid-major squads make it back to the tournament. You love to see it. People root for these mid-majors. These mid-majors are what make March Madness as great as it is. And
Yeah.
these mid-majors often tend to be our Cinderella teams that we see. If you look back in history, you have Loyola Chicago back in 2018. We have George Mason in 2006. Those are two of the most iconic Cinderella runs we've seen. I'll throw in the Gordon Hayward Butler teams. These teams are often the most iconic Cinderellas because people often don't hear about these teams until the tournament, and then just for them to have insane runs is absolute cinema. They're teams that people can rally behind. That is what makes March Madness as great as it is.
Everybody loves the underdog stories, of course, and especially when making those brackets later on, people are going to be looking at those kind of games and they're going to be like, hey, let's take a chance on them, shall we? So we'll see how much of that will happen. But hey, we still have 2 more teams to reveal here. At the 2 seed in this West region, this is a big reveal. Everybody, Kansas fell to the 2 seed at 27-4. The Kansas Jayhawks didn't do enough to secure a 1 seed. Unfortunate for Kansas as they fell to West Virginia in the semifinals of the Big 12 tournament. But hey, it's still respectable. They still had an amazing season, and they still got an opportunity to prove that, hey, maybe they did deserve a 1 seed, but that's for time to tell. But in order for them to even get started on that thought and on that goal, they first have to get past Northern Kentucky, your Horizon champs, again at 21-12. Funny enough, that's the same record that they entered the dance with last season, but they were a 16 seed, and just a refresher, they almost knocked off the Alabama Crimson Tide then. So what could they do this year? I don't know. But, Coach Rod, your overall thoughts on this region? If we still have Coach Rod with us.
Oh, I'm right here. I'm talking. I said, definitely the most loaded region out of the 3 that we've seen so far, in my opinion. I mean, we got the powerhouse coached by Kale and LSU. We got Kansas, who I think was one of the most dominant teams of the year until the fall off in the Big 12 tournament. Man, we saw them beating teams by 20 and 30 that were ranked at times. Auburn has been consistently good throughout the last couple of seasons. Iowa State, we know, is solid. Iowa, I mean, there's not much to say about them. And then, like I said earlier, Creighton, coached by Zelkoff. So I think this region is really up for grabs. And not to forget to mention Duke, too, as well, who has made the Final Four. So, I mean, this is a star-studded kind of region. So I can't really give you a winner. If I had to take one, I think Kansas comes out of this one.
It's an interesting pick for sure, and I'm definitely interested to see what everybody else picks when we all make our March Madness picks in the bracket that will come out later tonight. But before we even do that, we still have one more region to reveal, and that is the Midwest region, home of the last ranked number 1 seed. And I think this is going to shock a lot of people, but Spartan, it's the Michigan State Spartans at 28-4 overall, slide up to the 1 seed. So you got 2 Big Ten teams at the 1 seed line. Just real quick, what a season. What a bounce back season that the Spartans have had. The past 2 seasons before, in 2031 and 2032, they have been very disappointing because this team, as we know, is very talented, and they just haven't lived up to that billing. Finally, they have. And this is the reward for it. 12-3 in the Big Ten. They finished 2nd there and also 2nd in the tournament as they lost in the championship game to Big Brother. Moving on, though. Let's see what the rest of this region has in store. The Spartans will have to start out their run against Arkansas Pine Bluff. The Lions finished 22-10 in the SWAC conference, winning that one in its tournament. It's an interesting matchup here, but an even more interesting one falls right below them at the 8 line. Bring on them Aztecs from San Diego State at 28-4, a very respectable record. fell in the Mountain West Conference Tournament final to New Mexico, but it was very close. The other two meetings before versus the Lobos were not so close. So to see that progression and the maturity of that team growing, because they're very young, is very, very, I would say, exciting for Coach Veers and co. But they will first have to play a Final Four team from a year ago. Blitz Bama Blitz. It's the Crimson Tide at 22-9. Very interesting matchup here. Coach Pike, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I don't see anything wrong with them putting it the 9th seed. I mean, you're putting up against a good team like San Diego State. And so I think you're going to see an absolutely great battle between these two teams, especially since the San Diego State's rise from what you said about them losing to New Mexico twice and then being close to them in the championship fight. It's going to be interesting to see how they've come so far, especially against the Bama team here in the first round.
Absolutely, and just a reminder again, Alabama didn't get worse. They have done the right things to improve their team. It's just, again, the SEC was just crazy, especially up at the top. Just more wins to share, unfortunately, and they were on a bit more of the harsh receiving end, if you know what I mean there. But at the 5-12 line, let's move on down real quick. Enter them Cougars from Houston at 30-2. Coach Ozuna, what a first season he has had, bringing Houston back to relevance, winning the American outright. A beautiful season for Houston indeed, and it's great to see a team that, you know, is technically hosting the Final Four to be in the field of 68. But in order for them to even realize that dream, or to get started on realizing that dream, they will have to get past whoever makes it out of the game between Virginia Tech and George Mason. Virginia Tech being 21-10 after a bit of a lackluster finish to their season. They've had some decent wins, a decent resume, nothing eye-popping, but they're still a talented team. And then George Mason. The conversation about this team was very interesting. Coach Killian, do you want to tell us more about what the committee had to deal with when it came to George Mason and maybe some other teams that we won't discuss quite yet?
It definitely interesting. George Mason was talked about a lot with that final last four in. They were talked about with Northwestern. They were talking about with Georgetown. But they were the ultimate picking for that last spot, and that's going to be a great matchup for Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech was very dominant in the ACC, kind of fell apart, but this should be a great 12 matchup right here.
Absolutely. And George Mason, just to clear up, they are 26-6. It's a very good record, just not much substance, except for, notably, they are Florida Atlantic's only loss. So that's just insane to think about. And I think that's partly why they're here. But moving on down to the 4-13 line, bring on Coach Pugsley and his Wildcats from Kansas State, 26-4. This team, just like a few others, have come out of absolutely nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. Yes, they have talent, of course, but in terms of pure expectations, we did not think that they would have this kind of season. They finished 26-3, and then they had an unfortunate first game versus Baylor. But besides that, they are an incredible bunch. And again, Coach Pugsley in his first season getting his team to a 4 seed, that's Jerome Tang-esque. So a lot of respect to Coach Pugsley and his Wildcats. But they will first have to get through St. Francis, the Northeast Conference champs at 24-8. A bit of an unsuspecting 24-8, to be honest. But, you know, we look back at history, right? Kansas State, they made a 4 seed before, and they played 13 seed UC Irvine. And at least at that time, they were without their best player, who was Dean Wade, and they just unfortunately couldn't hang with the Anteaters. But do I think history repeats here? I don't think so. They are fully healthy. Moving on down to the lower quadrant. At the 6 line, Bring on them Sooners of Oklahoma at 24-6. A bit of a down year again. And again, if you talk to Coach Wells, coaches its team, by the way, he will tell you he feels like his team is slipping. But let's keep it a stack. This team is young. They lost a lot of core pieces from the last couple of years, notably from the team that won the national championship back in 2031. But it brought in a lot of talent that they've done all right. But with that said, with this being JD Avery's last hurrah, can we see some fireworks from the Sooners? I don't know. But in order to do that, they have to first get past the Badgers of Wisconsin from the Big Ten at 20-11. What an insane schedule these Badgers have had. So at 20-11, it feels like, okay, they may be a playing team, but again, look at their resume. Look at the amount of tough games that they've had to play. The committee decided, hey, they've done well enough to avoid the play-in round. And so, who's up next? I believe it's Coach Killian. What are your thoughts on this matchup?
It's definitely interesting to see. I mean, it was, I think, 2 seasons ago they met in the Elite Eight, and it was really back and forth. Oklahoma was able to come out on top, but we could see something different here. Wisconsin was on a rebuild. They were dominant throughout the season. They had a couple losses in the season, but Wisconsin is an underdog team. They were almost considered missing out in this tournament as well. But Oklahoma is just dominant. Coach Wells has kept this team going, and he's kind of kept that same strategy that he kept for the national championship run that he had.
Absolutely, and actually, it was supposed to be Coach Mays that was up next. Kind of lost track there, unfortunately. But real quick, Coach, what are your thoughts on that?
Definitely an interesting matchup there. Wisconsin's obviously been through the ringer with the schedule they've had. I mean, you have some non-conference games like Providence in there, and then just the Big Ten schedule in itself is one tough league. I mean, there's arguments for them being the top league in college basketball this year, along with the Big East. It's a tough schedule. I mean, there's not much you can do about it. You can only control how you play against teams, not who you play. But I think that team's going to be a dangerous squad. Coach Richter's got them right, and I'm excited to see what they can do.
Absolutely. So moving on down to the 3-14 line, you got the Wildcats of Villanova from the Big East. Coach Creed and his Cats are back in the dance. 25-6, like I said, they fell to Creighton in the Big East semifinals, and it was a close game too. The committee has respected the Big East as they are the best conference in the land for this season, and they are rewarded with the 3 seed. And they are also rewarded with having to play against McNeese State, your Southland Conference champs, at 23-9. A very interesting matchup there. Many people remember that game versus Drake, where they unfortunately got upset. But from what I understand, it's not going to be the same thing. It's not going to be the same Villanova team that we saw last season. And so I expect big things from the Wildcats. And not to mention that Oklahoma-Wisconsin game, if you were here for a long enough time, this game happened before, 2 years ago in the Elite Eight, where Oklahoma beat Wisconsin. And by the way, Laza was still on that team. At the 7-10 line, you've got the Wake Forest Demon Deacons at the 7 line at 24-8. They had a nice little ACC tournament. They've had a nice season in general as well. It's very respectable what they've done, especially for this being Coach McQueen's first season. A very respectable team, and in a way, kind of underrated in my opinion. But we will see if they can prove that. Because if they're going to prove that they're underrated, you got to start off by beating Kentucky, who's 23-8 coming from the SEC. Kentucky is a bit of a wild card here. They've been a 2 seed the past couple tournaments. They've lost a guy like Andre Blake to New Mexico. They just haven't been the same team. They lost Thomas Kostner from last year, but they're still a formidable foe. And they've proven themselves a little bit in the SEC. They just need to gather themselves for Wake Forest, because that's a tough team. But to finish it all off, you got the Trojans of USC at 29-3 outright Pac-12 champs beat Colorado head-to-head and have made a case for them to be a 1 seed, but at the end of the day, they thought Michigan State just had a better case, and understandably so. The Pac-12 just wasn't as strong. This is only the 4th team that we see from that conference make it. But at least to prove their might, they will have to get through Samford, the SoCon champs, at 20-12. This is the Field of 68, everybody. Coach Rod, what are your thoughts on what we see here?
For this region,
Yep.
I think USC's got something to prove.
They have.
Not being that 1 seed, the committee thought maybe Michigan State had the edge over them, so I think USC can come in, put a little chip on their shoulder. But honestly, I don't even think either of those 2 teams walk out of here in the Final Four. I am making my bold prediction right now. Well, not really bold, but I do believe Kansas State comes out of this region.
That is as bold of a opinion as we can have here, as all of a sudden now your boys got to go restart the March Madness music. That's crazy. Nope, we're not doing that. But while I do that, Coach Pike, what are your thoughts on the region?
I think it's gonna be more of a competitive, more competitive actually. I mean, you have teams like Michigan State in there. Kansas State could be another argument. Oklahoma, maybe an argument, but USC and Michigan State is probably going to be a barn burner if they both make it to the round of 8 or the Elite 8. My apologies. But yeah, I mean, all these games look very competitive. I could see major upsets happening, or possibly just teams making the Cinderella run that they want to see in a tournament like this.
Absolutely. And so that is the field complete. But with that said, we have a couple more things to look at. So we have seen the teams that are in the play-in round, and you know, we figure who the Final Four in war. But who are the first 4 teams that were left out? Let's look at them real quick. Here are the comparisons between Virginia Tech, Northwestern, Georgetown, George Mason, who are in. But the first one out is DePaul at 20-11. Even though they came from the Big East, that 4-9 record, plus a lack of marquee wins with only 1 against St. John's late in the season, it just didn't do enough, especially once Baylor did what they needed to do to get into the field. And then you also have USF, as you can see, at 24-8. Just an unfortunate fall for that team as Coach Mohammed left, and then their core left, and they were still a decent team. They just didn't have the resume to get in. That is also the same thing for East Carolina, another solid team, but just without Coach Higgs being there, they couldn't necessarily build more upon what they had, and unfortunately just didn't have the resume. And then the San Francisco Dons at 23-9, coming from the West Coast Conference, being Gonzaga's conference. It's just not enough. We saw them in the tournament last year. They're not there now. But it's funny. We look at this, right? DePaul, USF, San Fran, they were in the tournament. Virginia Tech and George Mason were not in the tournament. It's very interesting to see how year to year things change. Coach Killian, what are your thoughts on that?
It's definitely interesting to see where San Francisco, they made it last year, and now they're bumped out. As you got to be thinking, when is this committee going to start thinking about those smaller schools that maybe deserve a better opportunity at this tournament than Northwestern or Georgetown? Like, Northwestern had a downfall of a year. They weren't as dominant as what they were last year. Same with Georgetown. You know, they lost their head coach. He went to Florida State. They kind of fell apart. It's got to be, the question is, when are the committee going to start thinking about these small schools?
That is definitely a good question, but when you see, again, it's not just about small schools. They have to also prove themselves through playing tougher games. And if they don't get those, they have to be more consistent. And so when the committee looked at that, I think they just didn't see enough consistency. They saw too many flaws in those resumes. And then when it just came down to it, even though Northwestern, Georgetown may have been a bit more questionable, I wouldn't say Virginia Tech. I would say more so Northwestern, Georgetown. They just saw that, they still played in two of the best conferences in the entire country. And so you have to put in the best teams. You can't just put in, fan favorites. And so this is why those teams made it. But let's look real quick at the outlook of, the conferences that put in more than one team. The ACC, oddly enough, despite the Big East being coined as the best conference in the country, are beaten out by the ACC, who put in 8 teams. And it's a 4-way tie. The Big East, Big 10, Big 12, and SEC put in 7 teams each, which is crazy to think. And then you got the Pac-12 at 4, and then you have a 3-way tie at the bottom between the American, Atlantic 10, and Mountain West with 2 teams each. Coach Mays, what are your thoughts on seeing this part of the presentation?
I think it's definitely proving our point even more that there is so much parity in the league this season. Like, there is so much parity in NCAA basketball right now. But also, I want you guys to take a look down there at the Pac-12 having only 4 teams. When people may raise questions about maybe why USC didn't garner a 1 seed despite having a better record than, say, Creighton and Michigan State, 2 teams who garnered 1 seeds, you have to look at who they played. When you're playing in a conference consistently that only has 4 teams make the tournament compared to 7 from the Big East and Big 10, it's going to have some weight to it. Strength of schedule is one of the most important factors that the committee looks at whenever they're deciding who makes March Madness. And I think that's why we see Michigan State get that last 1 seed over USC.
I definitely agree. So, because you see how, once again, even though ACC leads up at the top with 8 teams, it's still a difference of 1 team with 4 conferences tied with that number. I mean, you can pretty much slice it up just about evenly. And it's just insane to see how, especially last year, if I remember correctly, the Big 10 had 8 or 9 teams in themselves. I believe it was either the Big 10 or Big 12 with 7, and then there was a 3-way tie at 6 teams between the SEC, Big East, and I think the Pac-12 actually. And so it's just crazy how things have unfolded and how things have changed year to year. But before we get out of here, I just want to get everybody's individual thoughts, opinions, predictions, for this whole entire tournament. Starting with you, Coach Rod. You've made some predictions along the way for regions, but ultimately, if you had to pick a Final Four right now and then a national champion, who would it be?
I believe we've lost Coach Rod from the broadcast.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Oh, okay. I hope he joins back. If he does, just let me know. But in that case, I will ask that same question to Coach Pike. What are your Final Four? What's your Final Four? Or what do you think is going to be the Final Four? And who would you pick as the national champion?
I think the Final Four is going to be Tennessee, Michigan, Creighton, and USC.
Tennessee, Michigan, Creighton, USC. Okay, so 3 1s and a 2 seed. Okay. And then who's winning it all?
I think it's going to come down to probably where's the ranking? Like, where does the bracket?
Okay, so per what you just said, Tennessee, USC would play, and then it would be Michigan, Creighton.
Okay, so give me Creighton, Tennessee for national championship. I think Tennessee wins it all.
Okay, so you think Tennessee completes the undefeated season? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Coach Killian, your predictions?
I definitely see, I'm gonna say Michigan State is gonna be the first 1 seed out. I think with that San Diego State and Alabama matchup, I think one of those teams is gonna knock out Michigan State. I don't think Michigan State is your strongest 1 seed. I have the thought, like with USC, I think they should have been that last 1 seed. I don't see them better as Kansas, and I don't see them better as Michigan State. But if I were to pick my Final Four, I could see Houston, maybe Oklahoma, I don't remember the bracket.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. I'm sure we will see your official predictions once everybody can make their bracket. Which, by the way, to answer a comment in the chat or from the community, those will be released later tonight. They still have to be made, but they will be made within the next couple of hours, and it will be up on the league link tree. There will be a link to it. You can download it from a Google Drive link and then put it together and post it. And there will also be a hashtag that we will have you use so that we can track everybody's brackets. Let's put it that way. And then Coach Mays, unless we have Rod back, which again doesn't seem like we do. But Coach Mays, your Final Four and national champion?
Okay, so out of the West region, I'm going to have to go with North Carolina. They are a squad I've been high on all season. They've had some ups and downs, but I think Coach Smith has these boys right going into March. And also, building off what Killian said, my bold prediction, Tennessee is the first 1 seed to fall.
Ooh.
And granted, I think they are a phenomenal team, but you see those close games they've had, right? They are bound to drop one at one point, and I wouldn't be surprised to see 2 strong seeds at 8 and 9, and Arizona or maybe Maryland taking them down.
Interesting.
As for the East region, I'm going to go with Michigan. I'm not going to be a homer here and pick West Virginia. I truly think Michigan will end up being the national champion this year, which is why I picked them going to the Final Four. In the East region, I'm going to go with either Creighton or teams I think are very solid right now. I think the winner of that matchup, should LSU defeat Duke and should Creighton defeat the winner of Nebraska and Arkansas, I think the winner of that matchup goes on to the Final Four. And to finish us off, in the South region, give me Villanova. I like the 3 seeds this year. The 3 seeds are strong. You look at Iowa, Villanova, New Mexico, and North Carolina. I'm not as high on New Mexico as the other 3, and I'm not as high on Iowa as I am on North Carolina and Villanova, obviously. I think both those teams make it to the Final Four. But I have 2 3s at 1 seed and possibly a 1 or 4 seed making the Final Four this year.
Interesting. So, all right. But okay, I think we still need an official team pick from Creighton's region. So you have North Carolina, you got Michigan, you have Villanova from the Midwest, and then from the West, who would it be for you?
For the West, man, laser beam pointed at Earth. I have to pick one. I'm going with Creighton.
Okay, all right, and then your national champion based on that.
I'm going to go in the matchup between the East and the South region. Give me Michigan over North Carolina in the Final Four. And then in a all Big East affair between the West and the Midwest, Villanova for the upset. I think either team really takes down Michigan. I'm really high on Michigan this season. I think those 2 losses were kind of a fluke. I think they're our national champions this year.
Okay, let me throw a wrench in the woodwork here, because it will actually be, per your picks, it'll be North Carolina, Villanova in the Final Four, and then it would be Michigan, Creighton. Okay, so would your national champion stay the same because of that?
My national champion is still Michigan. Tougher matchup with Creighton there. But honestly, coming out of the other side then, give me Villanova still. I think Villanova defeats North Carolina to make the national championship, and I have them falling to Michigan in the end.
Okay, so an interesting prediction there. We get Michigan getting revenge finally for 2018 in real life. Okay, that's cool. I respect that for sure. And then we don't have Rod back, do we?
No.
I don't believe so, no.
Ugh, unfortunately.
Can I make a bold prediction?
You want to make a bold prediction? Go for it.
Yeah. 2 number 2 seeds are not going to make the Sweet 16.
Ooh, I like it. I like that
That is a bold
lot.
prediction, but looking at these 2 seeds in their matchups, the parity that there is, and college basketball right now. I could see it happening.
I like that a lot. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm just trying to remember what happened in last year's tournament because, wait, no, that did happen in last year's tournament because let's remember, UConn got bounced by what's its face, Kansas, in the round of 32. UCLA got bounced by Florida State in the round of 32. There was another 2 seed that got bounced in that round. We had 3 or 4 2 seeds. I'm trying to remember who it was. Yes, that's right. Kentucky by West Virginia. Yeah. So I don't know if that's like a bold prediction. I think that's a reasonable one, considering everything. So, and also one more thing about Michigan, real quick. I don't know how I didn't mention this. They've been playing without Pablo Poblowski, their senior small forward who before being injured led the team in points. They lost him for quite a while, like in the middle of January somewhere. But assuming Michigan makes it to the Sweet 16, he's going to be back for the second weekend. And so that's a scary thought. That's also why I can understand the picks for Michigan to win it all. And then I'll finish it off with my predictions, and then we will get out of here and officially put our brackets together. So fun times ahead. But before I do it, before I sit down, analyze, and do some mathematical calculations, or just out of sheer hope and thought, let me put this together for you. I think out of the South, I think you're gonna get Tennessee. I just don't see how anyone takes them down, at least up to the Final Four or the Elite Eight. Excuse me. I just don't see how they do it. In the East, this is very interesting. This is very, very interesting. It's hard to pick a team from here. I think I'm gonna have to go the safe bet and pick Michigan. I'm just too dominant right now. Out of the West region, if I couldn't pick Creighton for reasons, I think we see LSU back in the Final Four, or not back, but they'll make it. And then in the Midwest, I think we will actually see USC make it to the Final Four. And so based off that, I think we're going to see a Tennessee versus Michigan national championship. And I think we're going to see Michigan win it all because again, it's been too crazy of a season to see Tennessee complete that perfect season. They could do it, but I just don't see it. And so with that is officially the selection show all wrapped up. Wow. This is about to be a fun time, isn't it, guys?
It really is. It could go either way. So many matchups that could lead to upsets. Anything could happen. This has been a phenomenal season. It's going to be real sad when it comes to the end, but we're just all happy to be here. It took forever, but we are glad to finally be here.
Absolutely. Any last thoughts and comments, Coach Pike?
No comment. I got nothing.
Fair enough. No comment. You're just locked in to see what happens this March. But what about you, Coach Mace?
Definitely, I'm most excited for this March more than I ever have been. This March looks like it has the best matchups, the best teams, and the best storylines. I think this has everything you need for a great March, and once it starts playing out, it'll only get better.
I definitely agree, so I can't wait for the action to start unfolding. I mean, even with the first 4 round, I'm eagerly awaiting that because once the first 4 starts, we can officially say March Madness is back. Thank you, everybody, for watching and coming by, seeing this field of 68 be shown to everybody. This is just going to be an insane tournament. I can't wait. The cast can't wait, and I'm sure you can't wait as well. The blank brackets that you will be able to fill out, like I said, they will be put in a Google Drive link. It'll be shareable via a link. You will find it in the league link tree, and I hope to see everybody fill it out and I hope to see some success. It's hard, of course, very hard. You can never get a perfect bracket, basically, but I'm interested to see who wins it this season. Thank you all for watching. May everybody have a great rest of your weekend, and I will see you all very soon for all of 2033's March Madness.